Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome to week 9. I hope that you had a great spring break. I hope you were able to get some downtime and maybe do something fun. I think I'll maybe even put a question here about that just so that you can fill it in. And when I do, and tell me about what you did. When I do those, I know I've gotten emails from a few people saying it doesn't have the full points. Those don't get added till I grade them. So if there's a delay, it's if I have a fill in the blank or something I have to grade. Other than then when I do the multiple choice thing, that's what happens. So hope you had a great spring break, and we are back. So we are halfway through with the class, and I just want to encourage you all mentally to if you've been doing a great job in the class, keep it up. If this class has got off to a rough start or it's been shaky at all, now's the time to reset and focus. Hopefully you're reading my comments, you're not plagiarizing, you're doing all the things that you need to do. If you didn't go back and read comments, please do those. I mean, there's an easy way to read them in the inbox, and so that we can be on the right track. Honestly, I tell you, this is the truth. I would love to give you all A's on every assignment. It would certainly make my life a lot easier. The thing, is that some of you do amazing jobs and you really put the work and the effort in, and some of you don't put as much work and effort in. And so it wouldn't be fair to just give everybody the same. So remember that a C is that you kind of did the minimum. You sort of hit the basic marks. The B, the A, you've got to go above and beyond and to do the work. So with that in mind, we are moving forward. A couple of things. Your test 2 is coming up. And in fact, it's going to be, I had to double check my sheet over there. It's not going to be at the end of this week. It's going to be at the end of the following week. So you have test 2. You've already done test 1. You know how that goes. The next thing is that you have your concert report. And I know that I've been mentioning this. And so it's a little less than a month away. You are more than welcome to do it now and get it turned in now and be done with it. And then I'll grade them all once I get them all and I get into the zone of that. But that due date is a fixed due date. It's a good amount of points. If you have questions, please reach out to me. So it's got to be a video concert online. Established band, read everything. It'll the breakdown will tell you everything that I want on there. And again, if you want a good job, also watch that minimum word count. Watch all those things that you need to do. I'm still getting some folks that aren't hitting the minimums on the reflection observations. So enough of that. Enough reminders. Welcome back. Let's talk a little bit about what's coming up. So we have gone through a lot in the first half of the class. We went through blues and Tin Pan Alley and jazz and ragtime before that. We led up through rhythm and blues into rock and roll. And then from rock and roll, we learned about soul and Motown and doo-wop. And you learned about the British invasion and the American response to British invasion. And, once again, the questions that I ask you, the answers are all in the book. You don't need to go crazy looking for other stuff. It's all there. If you have it, you just make sure that you put it in your own words, that you're not plagiarizing. You should be fine. I don't ask you for things outside of the materials of what I'm looking for. So, and then we learned about folk and we learned about Bob Dylan. So we've really gone through the foundation of rock and roll and some of the offshoots and the basics. And by hitting folk and then into folk rock and everything, we've really laid a really good foundation. So now what's going to happen is that the history of rock music, pop music, whatever you want to call it, is going to be all of these fragments that are going to shoot. And so if you imagine this, all of a sudden you've got this foundation here, and then everything just starts to shoot off in different directions. So we've seen a little bit of that with folk rock. And there was mention with Bob Dylan of country rock, but you're going to learn about country rock. So you're going to get a lot of hyphenates, and you're also going to get new genres that come out of other things. So like next week, we'll be dealing with hard rock and heavy metal. This week, you're going to deal with psychedelic rock, and there's 2 chapters this week. So you have psychedelic rock in chapter 10. Chapter 11 is on country rock and jazz rock. and then you'll also learn about fusion. I'll add that in as well. So psychedelic rock now, again, to set up, we're still in the 60s, so we're going to maybe start to branch a little bit into the 70s a little bit, but we're still in the core of the 60s. And when we're talking about psychedelic rock, we're talking about a very specific scene that developed largely out of San Francisco, and you'll learn about the reasons why. You'll learn about the Beat Poets, which was a group of poets. It's not a group. Sometimes people will do their assignments and they'll talk about the Beats as though they were a band. The Beatles were a band. The Beats were a group of writers, a group of poets. So you're going to learn about all these different influences, and the book is going to talk about them. And I, even on my introduction to this module, break things down with a timeline. So everything is there that you need to know. You're going to learn about the impact of psychedelic drugs. You're going to learn about the impact of the Vietnam War, the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, sexual liberation. You're going to learn about the important role the pill played, because that was a huge game changer in the world. That really facilitated that whole scene. If you think about it, up until this time with birth control, it was really the man's responsibility. And when the birth control pill comes in and gets legalized in the late 60s, what happens is that it changes the power dynamic in terms of who has control of reproductive rights. And there's always, with all these things that come up, there's always pros and cons. So there's some good points about this, good moves out of it, in that it puts the control with the women in terms of getting pregnant. But there are some downsides. One of the big ones being STDs, right? Sexually transmitted diseases. Because if you're just dealing with the pill and everyone's having free love and they're doing all the stuff that they want to be doing, of course, also, you've got all sorts of diseases that can happen, and they did. And you also have issues with, of course, you can still sometimes get pregnant in those situations. And so now you're bringing kids into this situation, and those things happen. So you're going to learn about that, existentialist thought. You're going to learn about the movement, the fascination away from Western thought into particularly Eastern thought, Asian thought. And you're going to learn about the influences of Buddhism, particularly Zen Buddhism, as well as Hinduism and other things. So everyone's going to be searching. It's a very sort of lost time in a lot of ways, and this is a result of World War II, and particularly I don't know how much I've gone into it, but really what we're going to see now in this time period, that World War II ended in 1945, and the events that really brought that to an end were the dropping of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and so that idea changed the world into this idea of that you can annihilate large numbers of people quickly, and things could be gone. And as the nuclear powers ramped up, the Cold War was going on, all of this was happening. This influenced a lot of the people in the 60s because they felt like we could die any day, right? Anything could happen. And when you have that sort of fatalistic attitude, then that removes some of the restrictions that you may have, and it opens up, you like, what do I have to lose, right? I'll go ahead and take acid, and I'll go ahead and have sex with all these people, and I'll go ahead and do all this sort of stuff because we could be gone tomorrow. And even in the 70s, when I was growing up as a kid, we had earthquake drills, like you all probably had, but we also had nuclear bomb drills. So there was a different series of bell rings, and that we would have to duck under our desks in case of a nuclear attack. So that was a real thing that we dealt with, but it was a very real thing that was going on in the 60s. Again, the Vietnam War, the protests, a lot of the people that were going off to fight that weren't coming back. A lot of the soldiers that were over there were getting, they were being given drugs and using drugs and to cope and all of that. So there's a lot going on in here. And so I want you to, you're going to learn about that. And I want you to really think about it, because I'm going to ask you questions about sort of what are all the things that impacted the movement? What residual effects are there still today? So just be thinking about that as you're going through it, because you're going to be asked for it. And again, my recommendation when you go through these things is that you watch the video on Monday, ideally on Mondays. this video. You go through all the materials Tuesday, Wednesday. When those assignments open up, spend some time thinking about what I'm asking. Work out your answers. Think about them. Make things that are thoughtful. Okay? So you're going to learn about psychedelic rock, and then you're going to learn chapter 11 is on country rock and jazz rock. And so country rock is rock and roll that is influenced by country. Now, there was, of course, as we've learned, country influences into rock and roll with Johnny Cash and folks like that, even going back to Hank Sr. and all of that. But what happens with country rock is that you basically have rock and roll guys that are saying, hey, let's go back to some of this roots and let's dig that out. And a lot of that came from Bob Dylan with his album Nashville Skyline, and a guy by the name of Graham Parsons, who ended up joining the Byrds and changing the direction of the Byrds from a folk rock to kind of a country rock group with Sweethearts of the Rodeo. And then eventually it's this scene that the Eagles come out of. They come out of that being a kind of backing musicians for Linda Ronstadt. And then you're going to learn about Southern rock and the influences there. And if you think about it, you know, rock really originated in the South. So it's this big loop that comes back. And then you're going to learn about jazz rock. And jazz rock is an interesting thing. In a couple weeks, you're going to learn about art rock, or what we call progressive rock. And so in jazz rock, what you have are musicians who often are trained, because jazz is especially from the 60s on, was really something that involved a lot of training. The early days, not as much as it was developing. And so what you had was musicians that were trained in music. Maybe they went to college or conservatory. A lot of these guys knew how to read and write music, where probably 98% of all rock musicians for all time, even still to this day, don't know how to read or write music. It's all done by ear. But jazz was a little bit different. It's more sophisticated harmonically. There's more that's going on, and so what you have are musicians that have a kind of higher level of playability. And so what they could do and what they were influenced by. You'll also see more keyboard players that will come in, and we'll see that in progressive rock as well. So you're going to learn about that. And then in the module, I teach you a little bit about fusion. So jazz rock are rock musicians that incorporate jazz elements into them. And fusion is jazz musicians that are incorporating rock music into them. One of the probably most famous examples is Miles Davis with his album Bitches Brew, and he brings in, you know, instead of a swing beat, it's a straight 4, and he'll use electric bass instead of upright bass, you know, which a lot of the jazz guys do. So he broke a lot of rules that way. So those are what you're going to learn about, and I know this is quick, and I'm trying to do it that way, but I'm trying to help you to encourage you to finish strong. We got a lot of stuff going on. We've hit that halfway point, but we got to keep the work going, okay? You know how to reach out to me. You can message me on Canvas, anything that you have questions, anything that you're unsure of. I'm here to help. I want you to do well. And ultimately, I want you to understand the materials and particularly how they relate today. And I guess I'll just throw in a couple of things once again, which is that when I ask you about the current music scene or current artists, I mean like popular in the charts right now. Now, if you're talking about Guns N' Roses, they're not a current artist. You could argue with Chili Peppers because they did just put out another album. But you know, I want you to think about who's on the charts right now. Now, you may not be aware of charts, you know, but look at those Spotify playlists. Look at who's out there. Think about who I'm, how do I say this? Think about who is really in the music scene right now. And I know it's so weird, right? It's so different than the old days when it was like, who's getting played on the radio? In fact, nowadays, I'll flip around the radio stations and a lot of what I hear is old stuff. You don't even hear that much new anymore. And so think about that when you're dealing with current, when I ask you what is current. And again, I ask you to include examples, and that means artists from the materials, and always, always, always it means songs too. So really back your things up when I say, you know, what's a great example of, you know, from the materials that learned on, a great example of jazz rock then and you could talk about Blood, Sweat, and Tears and Spin and Wheel, and they're right in the book. They're in the materials. They are there. So make sure that you're using them. All right. I think that's it. Have a great day, great week. Talk to you soon. Welcome back. Bye.